everyone, my name is Chris Brazier. I'm the Group Event Director for Commercial Kitchen, Casual Dining and Lunch, three trade shows that you might know very well. I am delighted to be here today. Thank you for joining us on behalf of our friends at Charvet. We are here with superstar chef Tom Aikens, someone who I'm sure you're all very aware of, very impressed by, and is really leading the way globally now as one of our very finest chefs. We're here to talk about his career, but also about the amazing charity Only a Pavement Away and their incredible hospitality against homelessness initiative and all the things that go along with that. If you're not involved already, please do get involved. And we are going to watch a wonderful 20-minute video now, exclusive interview with Tom, before Tom joins us live at the end to answer any questions that you've got. So if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A box, put them in the chat box, and answer any of the anonymous polls as we go along. And I'll be back in just 20 or so minutes to speak to Chef himself and see what he's got to say about the industry and this wonderful charity. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the video.
We're going very well. As I said, we had the pandemic to deal with in the early part of 2020 because we just opened in December 19. So I think we've had up and down first 2 years of opening and closing several times, but now business is good. We've been pretty much full all the time, so can't complain. So Muse is a very much sort of, I guess it's small townhouse. It's always had something to do with food. I think for the last sort of 40 years. Obviously very different versions from what we're doing, from a pizzeria to I think like a sweet shop, news-agents and trattoria and pizzeria and everything. But since we've sort of had the place, the whole idea before that was in terms of trying to get, I guess people to come back is always the biggest conundrum, particularly in fine dining, because most people just go for a special occasion or a once in a lifetime treat, or maybe for a birthday and things like that. So it's just about what is the sort of the magic that is needed to get people to come back, and this is kind of something that was sort of always racking on my mind. And even at Tom Aikens, we'd have people that would come back, as I said, sort of once, maybe every 3 months, just for that special occasion. And because fine dining is, I guess you do sort of come and have an amazing experience, is trying to sort of get people to take something of that moment away with them. And kind of the only way I would say that really happens is really give people a sort of everlasting memory. Yeah. And in terms of doing that, I then sort of really looked into like how can we sort of, I guess, inject memorable experiences into people when they come, and sort of take a bit of Muse away with them. And so that was really the biggest thing for me, is like how do we sort of really create memorable experiences throughout their time coming to eat here. So not only as we've seen it's quite small, and you kind of feel it's like a more like a home than a restaurant, and then we just do little touches, as I said, like throughout the meal when they when they're eating, from the moment that they leave to arrive. And so we, as I said, like from the first moment they sit down, the menu it's kind of a pop-up of the building, and the way that we write the menu is it's just by 3 ingredients and there's a little story, so it's not sort of giving a whole detail about what the dish is. So there's always this build-up of excitement or interest in terms of, oh wow, what is it going to be that I'm eating. So we don't really give a full menu description, so then they don't really sort of really get anyway what they're going to be eating. So in a way that's a nice surprise. And then just as I said, throughout the whole part of the meal, we're trying to really give people a really close-up and personal service, and very attentive, not overly, but kind of fun and relaxed is really what we're trying to do, because I think there's a lot of fine dining restaurants that are quite sort of stiff and formal, whereas we try to take that sort of stigma away from it. and have a restaurant that people feel that they can relax in, they can be comfortable with as well, really. We've got a lot of repeat customers, and the objective of what we're trying to do, as I said, is trying to be head and shoulders above a lot of competitors in terms of the service and the style of food that we do, because you are up very close to what we do. You're kind of in it, and every angle of the kitchen, of the restaurant, you can see into the kitchen. So I think on that basis alone, it is very unique, it is very special, and people really sort of appreciate that we're kind of, we can have a bit of a conversation with them over the counter. And I think for the customers, I don't think they changed. I just think they are really interested in terms of what we're doing here, more than anything. Yeah, the whole I guess having more time than anything on your own, and to give back has always been at the forefront of me as a person. And I think the sort of, I guess, the first lockdown, when we didn't know what was going on, in terms of how long we were going to be shut, and I think that sort of first block of time, we were just thinking, okay, what can we do, to kind of, I guess, reach out to other people, see what they're doing, and because of, I guess, the unknown of what was going on, we felt, working closely with a charity, was just a great thing to do, because we had more time to do that. So that was when we then thought about, okay, what charities may need a bit more help than others. And as we know, there's a lot of different charities with lots of different courses, and we wanted one that was maybe sort of a bit more linked with hospitality. And so that's when we kind of sort of reached out to Only a Pavement Away in terms of what they're doing and their own criteria of who they help, fitted with ours. And as we know, homelessness is always on the increase, and even more so in pandemics. And so that was a reason why we sort of went with Only a Pavement Away. And at that point, when we sort of were speaking with them, they didn't really sort of have, I would say, much of a voice in terms of what they do and how they look after people, and what does the charity actually do. So it was great for us to to link up with them, and then we just started with a lot of things that were going on social media, started having a bit more of a rapport with what the charity was doing and who they were. And then I started sort of coming up with, we came up with an idea of doing the 5-minute challenge. Yeah, it was cooking a dish for 5 minutes, and then you could use whatever ingredients you wanted to, but then you had to nominate 5 other chefs and then donate £5 as well. And the good thing was you could use whatever ingredients, because a lot of things were being done where you only had like 3 ingredients, and I think for a lot of people it's quite difficult to get hold of produce, as we know, in the first few lockdowns, because everyone was mass buying of different goods, so it's quite difficult to get hold of even flour or sugar, as we remember, which is crazy. So we just left it up to people what they wanted to do, but it was just great to see sort of what people got up to in terms of being creative with as many ingredients they wanted to do, but they had to knock it up in 5 minutes. So we did that, and that went really well. I got loads of chefs involved with doing that, and after that, because it was such a good success, we then did the 5-minute feast cookbook as well. We had a load of recipes that we thought was a bit of a shame if we didn't utilize them in some way, because what we had was a whole database of good chefs, but their videos as well, because everyone filmed themselves, and it was kind of I guess the first cookbook of its own, where you had videos of chefs creating their dish as well as the recipe. So it's then quite a nice reference points for people to go back to to the recipe, and then they can click on the link and scan the link, and then have a video tutorial of the actual dish as well, which not a lot of books do. So it was quite nice, I think, an idea of what we had to include that with a QR code, so people could then see the recipe cooked live as well. Well, we basically, in terms of what the charity does, as I said, they help the homeless, and that could be into, back into obviously workplaces, or helping them off their feet in terms of finding them accommodation. They also help to to get them jobs, and then also help to get them to that point of actually having an interview. So they also will help you, for instance, write your CV if that's what you want, or if you want sort of extra, I guess almost like tutorials in terms of how to communicate better in terms of in interviews and things like this. So they do all that, which is amazing, and it's kind of aimed at anyone that, I guess, could be anyone from from the armed forces. As quite a lot of people from the armed forces become homeless because once in a way they finished their tour of duties, and it's difficult, and some of them fall on sort of hardship and things like this, and it's difficult to where to look for. And the Only a Pavement Away is, as I said, is a charity where they help all sorts of people back into work, and hospitality is one of the areas that they focus on, particularly in getting people back into work. So no, we're at the minute we're looking at creating also potentially Only a Pavement Away cafe as well. So we're sort of discussing that with them and how we can sort of be involved. They have a very sort of special event that happens every year called Cook and Dine, which again is basically helping to raise charity through this sort of big lunch event. So I went and helped cooked the whole event, did all the catering for it, and then there's people that are sort of basically give their time from hospitality, different sectors, and serve the event as well. So it's kind of fun. So you got all different people from all sorts of background in hospitality who are there they're helping me sort of do the cooking, and then also serving the food as well. And then there are obviously various different people who have actually gone on through sort of being helped by the charity themselves, who are there helping as well. And that's just to again raise awareness for the charity, but also it's a big fundraiser. So lots of people from the hospitality donate prizes and things like that. Yeah. Well, listen, I think the biggest challenge for anyone is sort of starting their own career and what they're going to be doing. That's the biggest sort of, I guess, conundrum, because hospitality is such a big arena to go into. There are many different strands that you can go into in terms of the service sector that it is, from banqueting to working in hotels, every different style of cooking that we have in London in terms of restaurants. So it's a big field to kind of be diverse in. But you obviously, I think, to really sort of get anywhere in a career, you have to pinpoint exactly what you want to do. And I was very much always set out on doing fine dining as a chef, and that was something that I really sort of had a big passion for from the get-go, and it was something that I really wanted to get into. So as soon as I left college, I then sort of applied to different places and worked my way up. But I guess the biggest challenge for anyone is in terms of really pinpointing where they want to do. Do they want to be a head chef, or do they want to have their own business? And that's I think the biggest challenge is exactly that, having your own business and operating it is still, I would say, it's a very exciting career, I think, in terms of as a restaurateur, as a chef. You're feeding lots of people, and there's nothing more satisfying than have customers leave on a day-to-day basis in your restaurant. And I think it's something that everyone really loves, is having great feedback, having good reviews, and knowing that the hours that you put in is worth it. Because at the end of the day, we all work really long hours, and it's a much easier environment than it was definitely a few years ago. I'm talking about probably a couple of decades ago. And I think in terms of the aspects of get out of it is huge. You can now go on and go to lots of different countries to work in, and the access to that is a lot easier through through social media and things like that. And so it's a really, I think, interesting time to be coming into the industry as a chef. It is still a very, very big issue. The fact of that we are in an environment where I think staffing on any level, whatever the business, is exceptionally tough, and it's not just our sector, but it's everywhere in the whole of the UK. From people working in not just obviously hospitality, but manual labouring, from sweeping the streets, to road working, to hospitals, even to abattoirs and things like that. Every sector has been massively hit because of combination of Brexit and of the COVID, and I think a lot of the hotels as well, they've struggled on filling their hotels because they don't have the staff to man them, and when you run a business potentially at only 50% of its occupancy or what it can actually do, it obviously has a pretty bad effect. So I think the key now, I think, for a lot of businesses is trying to really how you can attract more and more people into into the business, really, because it's tougher than it's ever been before, and I can't even remember when it's been as tough as this, to be honest. Not in my entire time, I think, as a chef, has it been this tough. We are, I think, in terms of trying to have the best equipment that we can. I think in terms of making everything more efficient is really what it's about, and we definitely have here at Muse had the opportunity to do that, because we basically had a blank canvas to what we can do. But saying that, it was a difficult blank canvas because of the size of the plates. So it's very small. There's only a certain amount that you can actually fit in it, and basically we had to have everything purpose built, made to measure. So as you can see, it is very, very small, but in effect of what we got is a very good kitchen that operates very, very well, because everything is close to hand, and I kind of like that in a kitchen, that everything is within reaching distance, and I think that makes a much more efficient kitchen as well. So Charvet, actually, I had a bit of history with them because we had them at Tom Aikens on Ellison Street. So the suite there was a Charvet. It wasn't the ultra bespoke suite that I have here, but it was still a Charvet, and I had, as I said, had a lot of fond years in that place, and as I said, because of the way that stove worked, and it definitely was a beast. It worked very well. I thought, do I really need to go anywhere else? And I think now that place has been taken over from Philip Howard, the kitchen there is 20 years, pretty much 20 years old, because we had it put in obviously the early stage, or the end of early stages of 2023. And it's still, as I know from Phil, it's still the same kitchen, so it's going still strong. Yeah, I think it's very important for me as a chef, trusting people that definitely going to be spending a considerable amount of money on, is that they know what they're doing. And because of my previous relationship with Charvet, I really didn't have any other choice in terms of who I was going to go to. And what they've created here is something that that is absolute quality, and in terms of what we've got is exactly the right shape, the right size for the amount of covers that we're doing as well, and of course in the performance of the cooking in what we have. There's as I said, an easy access to everything, from the fridges to what we've had inbuilt to obviously the cooking suites and everything. The drawer fridges was very important as well, easy access, so that that we have access to chilled environment as well as close to the cooking environment, and that was paramount in terms of making sure that we had easy access to everything for hopefully an easier service. I think in terms of what we've had put in, the only thing that we were going to put in, I'm glad we actually didn't. We were going to have like a salamander grill in there, which we don't need at all, and we kind of took that out because it was just definitely something that we didn't really need. For instance, we had some other things that we had put in specifically. We had the Clifton water bath put in here. We've had our own charcoal grill put in. So those are different, obviously totally different fabrications from what Charvet does. But because they could mount them into their own suite, it just made it a very quick and easy decision to go with them, because they're very flexible in terms of what they can do, and in terms of what they can incorporate into the suite as well. I think Charvet is very much a sort of brand that that is respected in the industry because I think of its legacy, and also its heritage and how long it's been around. That's for sure. So I think it's something that when chefs are looking at doing their own kitchen, they know that it's a brand and obviously is recognised as a brand of quality, and in terms of what we need is everlasting, something that's not going to be sort of breaking down every few minutes, because kitchens they definitely take a hit in terms of what they provide and what they're doing, so you need reliability, and I think that's what Charvet provides. It's constant and consistent reliability. Yeah, no. So we worked. When we were designing the kitchen, we were working with Advanced Catering, who helped to draw up the plans with Charvet. And I have to say that the whole process was pretty seamless. We had, maybe out of the final plan from the beginning was maybe just like 3 or 4 tweaks. So it wasn't like, and even though you may think it's a small area, so it should be quite easy, it's not at all, because I think it's even harder because you've got to fight over every single centimetre. So it's quite difficult at some points to decide on how big to have things. But I think Charvet put my sort of mind at rest to say, this is absolutely the right spec for this. This is the right spec for this, and you won't need this, or maybe we can try this. So they're very approachable in terms of what they thought should and shouldn't work as well, which is important as well. It's not just to say, yeah, you should have this, this, and this, and this is the better option because it's more expensive, whatever. It's about practically what is going to work in the space that you have. So, there was in lockdown a talk of having a Minister for Hospitality, which I think would be a great thing, because we don't have a particular voice in Parliament, and as we know, that in terms of the hospitality sector as a whole, I think it's the 3rd or 4th biggest sort of revenue provider in the UK in terms of jobs and obviously spending. So I think it's one of those industries that I feel is kind of not sort of undervalued, but the fact is that we don't have a proper voice, and I think a lot of issues that came up in in the lockdown, it seemed to be that above any other industry, we were the ones that got it in the throat, so to speak. In terms of having to close, in terms of the notifications that we got, sometimes it was less than 24 hours. Oh yeah, you're going to close. It's like, when we've bought a load of produce, and you've had to throw it in the bin because you're now shut. Obviously try to save them. It's just, I think having an actual voice for the whole of the hospitality would be an amazing thing. And I think at least to be able to have the fact of recognition for a lot of businesses in terms of what they provide for this country as well, and the people that they serve, and again, like, I think a lot more emphasis on trying to get people into this industry. So I think a lot more work needs to be done by the government in terms of enticing people into the industry, because now I think in terms of the workplace as a whole, it's a great industry to come in. There's so many sectors that you can go into, and in terms of the career that you want to, but it would be great to get more young into hospitality. The only thing, the things we got going on next, there's got a couple of things in the pipeline. We're doing later this year the British Pullman, so we'd say it's basically a dinner on the train going out of London all the way up to Kent and then back again, so it's a 4-hour journey. So basically having 3 or 4 courses, and obviously quite a nice setting going through the countryside. So we've got that, and then I'm opening another restaurant outside of the UK in Doha, time for the World Cup, so we've got a restaurant there, and then also doing something later in the year as well in Tokyo as well.
Hello, sorry, welcome back everyone. We're live, just in case you wondered. Chef Tom Aikens is with us now. Tom, thank you for that amazing video. Really, really amazing insight. How are you doing today? Good stuff.
Very well,
thank you for speaking at Commercial Kitchen, I should say, a few weeks ago. We really enjoyed having you with us. That video was absolutely brilliant. The chat box is full of questions. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to get straight into it with what some of the people have been asking. So Ella has put a load of good questions in, starting with what lessons have you learned from navigating a business through the pandemic, and what are the long-term consequences?
Well, guiding through, I think any business, let alone hospitality, was difficult for everyone. I think, as we've seen, the amount of closures that have happened, since lockdown finished and is still ongoing, particularly, pubs. There's hundreds of them that are closing, each week, each month. So it's an ongoing problem. The main issue, as we've seen, is the staffing issue that we've got across the sector, and that has been through the lockdown, and also conjointly with Brexit happening. People left the UK, didn't come back. No reason to come back for some of them, that's for sure. And I think we've now got a huge void that needs filling. A lot of hotels, as we've seen, are not opening for lunch times, even restaurants just opening up for dinner. And everyone is kind of scrambling a little bit in terms of filling the big void with staff. It also means that restaurants aren't at full capacity, which means they're not gaining the revenue that they were supposed to at this time of year. That's then having a knock-on effect on the bottom line. And as opposed to coming into a Christmas where everyone is hoping they're going to be making, the money that they should be, I don't think a lot of them will be, because they just don't have the staffing to do that. So it's a very difficult issue that we're all facing. And do I have any answers to that? No, not really. It's everyone is in kind of the same boat. There isn't a magic wand that is going to suddenly cure this. It's an ongoing thing, and we have to go back to, training new people coming into the industry from all different types of sectors, whether that's, whether that's school leavers, or whether that's people that are, taking a change in midlife and deciding to come into hospitality. So there's lots of different areas. My own involvement with the charity Only a Pavement Away, where they're also trying to get people into hospitality through the charity. Also, that's why I'm working with them to try and help that move along as well. So there are different areas that we can try and help the government, obviously, with the visa application scheme. We've actually taken on someone in Muse that has come through that program. He only started literally 2 weeks ago. It took us 3 months to get him into the country, to get him into the country, but into the workplace. So again, that's not particularly sustainable. If you've got to wait for 3 months to get someone to a start date and actually into your restaurant working, again, that's a problematic answer as well.
Absolutely. I think we've talked a lot there about staffing, how important it was to look after staff during the pandemic, and also the staffing shortages that there has been in hospitality now for a while, but it's getting worse, not better perhaps. And obviously Only a Pavement Away, the great work that Greg and Karen do, trying to help fill that gap, while most importantly alleviating homelessness. I think, what would your advice be now for someone that perhaps doesn't work in hospitality but is thinking about it? Because hospitality has changed a lot over the last 20 years, as you said in the video. It's not the same place it was. What advice would you give for someone that was thinking of entering it now?
I think there's a huge scope for education. If you're starting from afresh, or even if you're someone that's pretty experienced. I mean, I've seen over the course of the last 2 years, youngsters coming in, people leaving and going into some other vacation in terms of what they're going to do. But I think there is a huge variety of choice of what you can do in hospitality, whether it's in the private sector, whether that's in events, whether that's in mass catering, volume catering, whether it's in restaurants, hotels, whether you want to be a food photographer, whatever. I mean, there is a huge amount, whether you want to work privately on a boat. There is a huge selection of what people can go into. For restaurants, in standalone operators and restaurants in hotels, again, they're very, very different and offering two different things. I think for restaurants and hotels, there's a little bit more offer, I would say, in terms of the added extras, as I see, in terms of potentially more time off, better rates of pay, less hours. I guess there's more, I think, in terms of even staff outings and what they do together as a company and as a group. There's more objectives, I think, for hotel. There's obviously deeper pockets that they can afford to do these things. But then, for standalone operations like myself, we're looking again at, how we can make the workplace a better environment. Again, looking at the hours of what they do. I mean, my guys, we're fortunate that we have a fairly, small team, and I can afford to kind of operate, with a small team, because we only do 23 covers. But nonetheless, we still want to give, that level of service where we need, the right amount of staff for each service. So it's a constant tightrope, constant knife edge that we're working to. But still, on the back of my head, there is, it's two ways. You've got to look after your customers in terms of, what they're spending and the level of service that they want. Yet I've got to look after the staff as well, to making sure that they're not, working too long. So it's a very difficult tightrope all the time. And at the minute, as I said, we're working Sunday, Mondays we're closed, so they get 2 days off a week. They then get another day off in the week, so they're working, they're working 4 days. And then we're also looking at now how we can also give another half a day off as well, in the week as well. So basically, they will be working 3.5 days, out of the 7.
I take it that's probably quite a big change from when you started. We don't have to name any names, but when you entered this wonderful industry, the conditions and maybe some of the attitudes in kitchens weren't perhaps as you are treating you are able and aware enough to treat your teams now.
No, I mean it's a very different sector, that's for sure. There was, in my time anyway, there were only a few chefs that you wanted to work with, literally like five on your hand. We didn't have, the amount of restaurants and restaurant groups that you have in London now. So there was a huge amount of chefs wanting to get into these different restaurants, mainly the Michelin ones. Most of them, like, the Roux brothers, Waterside and Gavroche, they actually had, waiting lists to get in. So it was very, very different. So in a way, because of that, the staff weren't particularly, well looked after, kind of, working very, very long hours, 70, 80, 90, I was working sometimes 90 to, 100 hours a week. You just got on with it, and that was the way it was. If you didn't like it, then, goodbye. And also the rates of pay these days, are, because of the situation that we're in, it's more of, the chefs that are available anyway. They're almost, I would say, debating on what the salary should be. So for instance, when as a standalone business, you're up against a hotel which can offer slightly better rates of pay, as we know. But even for us, we're looking at a CDP, depending again on the experience, but anywhere between 33 and 35, thousand, which is pretty high for an independent restaurant to be paying. And there are no, nowadays that, there are no commis, that's for sure. Commis doesn't exist. Maybe a demi chef de partie, and then they're straight into a chef de partie. I haven't seen a commis in years.
When you started, Ben asks here, he's obviously heard some rumours, but Ben asked, did you really do 6 months unpaid at the start of your career?
I did, yeah, I did, because I couldn't get into the industry otherwise. So I basically, when I left college, as a very eager and slightly naive teenager, the only options in terms of where I wanted to go and work were in London. That was the place where everyone was, and that's where the best chefs and best restaurants were. And so I wrote off to to a lot of the hotels and the restaurants that I wanted to go and work in. So it was about 15. Again, that was when people wrote to each other, and you got a proper letter. It was quite nice. And out of all the restaurants that I wrote to, naming the likes of the Roux brothers and Nicolas Dennis, Pierre Kaufman, even Marco Pierre White, places like these, the response was, basically, thank you very much for your letter, but come back in 2-3 years, when you've got more experience, and then we'll look at you and your CV. I was kind of then a bit perplexed, as like, okay, that's very nice of you, but how can I get more experience if you don't even offer me anything to get more experience? So it was a bit of a conundrum. So I then said to my father, I said, look, these are the options, and I sort of came up with a brainwave of like saying, okay, what about if I offer my services and free for 6 months? I then had saved quite a bit of money anyway through my early years of doing summer jobs and whatever else, and I said, what about if I just work for nothing for 6 months, and then that way people can see how I work. So again, I wrote off all these letters again to the same people, and hardly any of them wrote back, apart from I got a letter from one of the Roux brothers who basically said, he almost laughed, fell off his chair. He said that, I can't believe I get a letter like this. And he said, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't allow you to jump to the front of the queue just because you're willing to work for nothing for 6 months. And so it was a chef called David Cavaliers, is a 1-star in Battersea, that gave me a job. Well, not a job, but he gave me a position for 6 months. So I worked for him for nothing for 6 months. And then he said that I had proved myself and my worth, and he then gave me a job.
Did that risk that you take, I guess the risk, in a calculated risk, albeit to get that experience, were you able to then go back to some of those people that you originally had written those letters to and be a bit more like, I've done this now, let's talk? Or was it not as instant as that?
Well, basically, I then, I worked with David for a full year. And then after that, I asked him to help me to get a job with Pierre Kaufman. So I had an interview with Pierre Kaufman, which was over and done in literally like 5 minutes. It was basically, meet and greet, handshake. And he was like, "So you want a job?" I said, "Yes, please." And he said, "Okay, you can start then." And that was it. So basically, I went for an interview, got the job offer. So out of working with David for a year, he then got me, an interview with Pierre, and I started working there. And then when I was there, it went from a 2-star to a 3-star in the year that I was there. So again, it was a lucky thing that I had originally, got to start with David, and David helped me to get the job there. So, it was amazing to then be working a 3-star, and then, once you get your feet into that, then, that opens a lot more doors.
Just in terms of, you've been through and opened some amazing restaurants in your time, but you've really recently, you're global now. I'm struggling to find cities in the Middle East and Far East where you're not got a restaurant now. So can you just expand on that a little bit, on why that's such an opportunity over there for you? What's great about some of those scenes over there, and how you fit into that?
So ever since I guess left Tom Aikens, and we closed that down, because I was then at a point where I wanted to do something smaller. And even back then, this was then 2014, the staffing situation in London was already becoming difficult. And that was a fairly big restaurant. It was 50 seats, so it still required 5-6 days of my own time, each week, which was, not that it was taking a toll, but it was just, for the rest of the team, it was still very difficult to find the right staff, and the drainage that it was becoming, on me, personally, just day in, day out, having to pick up shifts now and again extra, when staff couldn't be covered, was becoming more and more of an issue. So I just, at one point, I just thought, you know what, let's call it a day, and I'm sure that I'll find something else. And in that time that I closed it, I started looking for where I am now, Muse, which is a much smaller place. But in that time, I then went and did some consultancy for a restaurant out in Hong Kong, which was basically for 5 years. So that then took me to basically 2019, when I then sort of started this place. And then previous to that, I had approached the Edition Hotel Group, which is part of Marriott, which is obviously one of the biggest groups of hotels in the world. They have 3 sort of top-tiered groups of hotels in their group, which is the Edition, the W, and the Ritz-Carlton. And anyway, I started talking with them, and and they then put me forward for a property in Abu Dhabi, and that was the first one. So I had 3 restaurants there, and then after that, I then had a conversation with the Langham group of hotels. So they then offered me something in Jakarta, Indonesia. And then recently I've also opened in Doha, with a sort of private investor. And then also just recently another property with Edition Hotels in Tokyo, which was literally just very, very recent. And then that will be ongoing, in terms of other opportunities that come along, because once as I have seen, once you're established, and I only really now want to just do, maybe just one thing in London, unless it's with another hotel or something, I may look at doing something. But it's just because once you, I guess, have got yourself established in your named restaurant or something like Muse, why do I really want to do anything else? Because it's kind of at the top of the tree, and everything else filters down from. And I'd rather not sort of dilute that and have only one of something of this caliber in the capital. And then all the other kind of things that I focus on outside the UK are are obviously not a dumbed down version of what I do at Muse, but it's a more simplified, kind of version. And anyway, everyone else wants something different. So they range anywhere from, sort of casual to sort of premium casual concepts.
I was going to say that working with hotels, I know in some hotels you even have almost 3 different levels of concept. Is that fair? That gives you that chance to perhaps do the things that you're not known for on your own doorstep, where you're loved in London and around the UK, but when you go abroad you can try different things that you might not want to do here. Is that fair? Doing a range of concepts in hotels abroad allows you to do things that you might not want to do here.
Yeah, I mean, it does definitely give you that opportunity. Yeah, so with all the different concepts that I do, they definitely range from casual up to sort of premium casual. And in terms of the concepts, they're very varied. For instance, the one I have in Doha is health led. It's a kind of a sort of wellness and health being concept. It's basically a lot of plant based products and foods. It's a cafe deli stroke, also a restaurant. So it's a very sort of mindful, conscious restaurant of a menu. So we're kind of keeping kind of, I guess, all the fatty foods off the menu. So there's no cream, no butter or anything like that. So a lot of plant-based products as well. Huge amount of cashew nuts are used in making sort of cheesecakes and cookies and things like that. So it's again, it's it's great to be able to do these, because as a chef it's an interesting format and way of learning ourselves, because again, as a chef you never stop learning, and in terms of creativity as well, it's always interesting going into other regions of the world and other countries to see what's happening as well, and keep you afresh of new trends as well.
And I think looking back at how that has changed so much from those first kitchens that you were working in to having plant-based menus must be such a learning curve, even when you're at the top of your game. How would you describe fine dining as a whole as changing over that time? Because I think it has changed probably since the early style restaurants that you were working in. Has it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely become, I guess, in terms of a fine dining restaurant, definitely much less formal than it was. I mean, in the days when I was working, with likes of Pierre Kaufman and David Cavalier, just the staff in terms of working in the front of house, we were suited and booted, and wearing these horrendous white jackets and bow ties and everything. It was pretty awful, I have to say. And fully tablecloth operations, and the service was very stiff and formal, and kind of the room themselves, the actual atmosphere in the room was very hushed, and no one spoke and everyone whispered. And so it's definitely changed. And I would say that in terms of what we do at Muse is definitely more approachable, more personal. It's very much, I would say, guests are taken on, an enjoyable journey of food and nostalgia, and we really emphasize that, I think, because at the end of the day, people want to come to a restaurant where they feel comfortable, they feel relaxed, they feel, yes, that they're getting looked after, but it's got to be fun. It really has. And fine dining, I think that's where it's really changed. It's a lot more open, I think, in how it was than before. And it's, I think for what we, again, try to do is we try and destigmatize it in terms of, it being like a fine dining restaurant. And the word, fine dining, I think is a horrible word. It really is. Just, they should call it fun dining, not fine dining, because it should be fun and it should be enjoyable. And then they think, people definitely get that when they come to Muse, because we try and, as I said, make the enjoyment from the moment they come in to when they leave, an aspect of fun. Really.
Great answer. So a really good answer. One thing that I think I'm keen to know about, and Ella's asked this as well on the chat. Obviously, with all this traveling, I don't know how often you get to go home and have a good period of rest. But when you are at home, what do you enjoy cooking? What's your favourite go-to meal?
Roast chicken, to be honest.
Chef's classic.
Probably. I would say that I have, and every chef says this, of course, but I would say that I have definitely mastered the very best of a roast chicken. It's definitely, yes, very chefy. But I do enjoy, home cooking, when I'm at home, whether it's a shepherd's pie or whether it's, roast chicken or even, a nice toasted sandwich of cheese and ham. It's still sort of doing it in the right manner, making sure that it's damn tasty. But like for a good roast chicken, as I said, it's like a 2-day operation for the Sunday, for the Sunday roast. So I'll basically take my chicken, put it in a brine, an aromatic brine, salt brine, with herbs and spices and things, and then leave it for a good 6 to 8 hours, and then take it out of the brine, put it on a rack, leave it to air dry. So that I'll do on like a Saturday, leave it to air dry sort of Sunday afternoon. So it's got like on a Saturday afternoon, so it's got a good 8 hours air dry. Longer the better, to be honest. If you can even start on a Friday and leave it to air dry all day Saturday, even better. And then on Saturday evening, I'll take it out of the fridge, leave it at room temperature, so it's out, and then it'll be obviously constant temp all the way through from the inner cavity to the outside of the leg. And then at around 10 o'clock, I'll cook it at about 120 degrees, so very, very slowly.
Yeah,
a lot of raised eyebrows there.
This is somewhat different to mine, Tom. But...
What about? So then you're basically just cooking the breast. So the breast will then cook in about an hour, and then basically I then leave it to rest for about another, half an hour minimum to 45 minutes. Take the legs off, remove the legs, turn the oven up to 220 degrees, and then use the same roasting pan that the chicken has rested in. So there'll be lots of nice juices in there. Put the legs in there, and then cook it for about another 20 to 30 minutes. Crisp up those legs. So all those juices will turn to caramelized sugars, and then I sort of baste the legs in the oils and the fat, and they all become nice and crispy and juicy in sort of 30 minutes. And then the last 10 minutes, chuck in the crown of the breasts, and then rub the oil and the fat that have come out of those legs all over the breast. And then in 10 minutes, you'll have a really crispy skin on those breasts. And then after 10 minutes, take it out, leave it to rest for just 10 minutes, and carve it and slice it up. And you got nice crispy golden legs, and then nice moist breasts with a crispy skin.
Sounds absolutely amazing. I feel like I've maybe been doing it justice over the last few years.
Even making me in my mouth water as well.
I think you might have everyone on this chat knocking at your door next Sunday, but that's a lovely insight. Thank you very much for that. Just before we go, we wanted to just go back and speak about 5-Minute Feast in support of Only a Pavement Away. It's great that you're so involved with this. Can you just talk a little bit more again? There was some in the video, but just what you recommend people doing to get involved, what we can all do to play our part, and just what Only a Pavement Away means to you.
Yeah, so I started this in lockdown, and I approached the charity, and again, I was wanting to do something that that was involving the industry, hospitality, and they were a charity that kind of very, very few people knew about or had heard of, and because of, I guess, what we were going into, they were definitely, a charity that needed help, and there are more people, I guess, because of what was happening. It was a scenario where I think more and more people could have become homeless. So we had a sort of a phone call, and then they said, look, these are kind of things that, first off, people to be made more aware of the charities. So I said, okay, well, seeing as everyone was doing this, crazy online cooking things and doing various things for charities, so we did that. So we did the 5-minute feast, which is basically any ingredients. Wasn't like, because of the situation, you couldn't really get hold of everything and anything you wanted. So we just said, look, just use anything that's in your store cupboard or in your freezer or whatever you had. But the main part of it is you have to nominate 5 people, cook it in 5 minutes, and donate £5. So out of that, I got about 300 chefs to do it, and then from then on, quite a lot of other people got involved. So after we had sort of raised a good substantial amount of money, we then thought about using the recipes and creating a cookbook. So we then made it into a cookbook, and the good thing is because of everyone's recipe was filmed, we then had a recipe book that had the recipe with the picture and the info on the recipe, but then we had a QR code on there where people could watch the actual chef cooking the recipe, which was a first, so that was great. And then after that, I then started doing these events with them as well. I just did one previously at the Freemasons Arms halls, so Freemasons halls, which is for 300 people, where we call Cook and Dine, and again, it's sort of people from the hospitality were there, and I was then we got all the produce sponsored, and I then cooked a lunch for 300 guests, and again, lots of people helped within the hospitality sector of waiting and serving in the kitchen as well. So it was great. And then I again sort of helped raise a little bit more awareness of the charity, and a lot of people, there were lots of donations in terms of prizes. Again, they raised something like, I think 45,000 or something that goes into the charity. So basically the charity helps, as I said, with people that are homeless, and these could be anyone that obviously there's struck on hard times, or even they've seen a lot of people coming in from the armed forces as well. So it's basically helping them on their feet into housing, with food, and also in terms of depending how underprivileged they are and how long they've been on the streets, whether they need even help sort of putting a CV together, or whether it's getting them into their offices and getting them to learn about sort of interview techniques and things like this, to going in front of someone for a job. So they do all sorts of things, but fundamentally it's helping people back off the streets and and into hospitality through sort of work that way.
It's an absolutely incredible charity. I know that people can go and get the 5-minute feast at onlyapavementaway.co.uk. So please, everyone, go and buy yourself a copy there, please. Obviously, it's going to an absolutely incredible cause. Tom, thank you so much for getting involved with Only a Pavement Away. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
The great video and answering these questions today. We really appreciate it. Good luck for all the exciting things that you're involved with, whether on trains or in the Far East or Middle East. There seems to be loads and loads happening. Thanks to everyone who's watching. Thanks to everyone at Only a Pavement Away. And thank you to Charvet. I've been Chris Brazier. This is Chef Tom Aikens. Thank you from us both. We'll see you again. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you all. Bye now.